Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. It's a real pleasure to be joined here by some of the smartest minds in national security. And I actually want to start by looking at the state of national security around the world. Which countries right now are leading the charge in AI and national security? And what are they doing differently from the rest of the world? Dr. Fisher, could we start with you?
Besides the United States, I think one of the countries that is really displaying prominent leadership is, from a cybersecurity perspective in particular, is China. They obviously are doing a lot with AI. I'm sure the audience has already heard a lot about what China's doing in AI. From a national security perspective, one of the things that's happening is, with cyber in particular, is they're planting implants in a lot of infrastructure. We've heard of Salt Typhoon and Volt Typhoon. There was a 60 Minutes episode where General Hawk, who had been the head of NSA and Cybercom, talked about how China has been planting implants in critical infrastructure, water, power, things like that. And in cyber, like, one of the challenges is, do you know if it's working or not? And if you put implants in advance, you can know that it's going to work in advance because you can get little messages coming out. And one of the things that's really scary about that is that, like, the town that he talked about, that General Hawk talked about in the 60 Minutes episode, is Littletown, Massachusetts. Right? Littletown, Massachusetts is like a small town in Massachusetts. It doesn't have a military base next to us. It doesn't have critical tech development there. It's just a small town kind of in the middle of nowhere. The import of that town is really that they could disrupt the water system. Like, water is interesting because it is connected to the internet because it has remote operation capability. It has poison connected to the water system because that's how you kill the bacteria, right? So it means that an adversary can remotely poison the water supply. And that is why an adversary would have put an implant in that system, so that in case there was a conflict between nation states, you could disrupt the water and make it so that that town was poisoned, and that would cause, ramifications for the country. That's just one example of critical infrastructure where you could have cyber be able to cause nation-state level impacts. And AI, that attack is possible without AI, but what AI is allowing us to do, or allowing adversaries who are particularly skilled in AI to do, is scale the capabilities to more systems and more control over those systems. So it's ratcheting up the threat level to a much, much higher level than we're currently seeing.
Okay, so then we have China, which is now leading the race in AI national security. Then who is second to that? Chris Morales.
So Zach, thank you very much for having me. I'm Chris Morales. I'm a partner at Point72 Ventures, where I lead our defense tech investing practice that invests in areas that are critical to national security, such as space, AI, autonomy, and other sectors. I spent a little bit of time in the national security space before starting at Point72 Ventures. I actually started off my career in the US Navy flying FA-18s off aircraft carriers. Now, when it comes to AI, we spend a lot of time with folks who are looking to accelerate applications for AI for national security in the US. Those are startups. They're focused in areas like logistics or mission planning or open source intelligence. And fundamentally, what each one is trying to do is speed up what we call the OODA loop, or Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. It's an old military concept developed by a gentleman named Colonel John Boyd. Fundamentally, every military conflict involves two sides working through their respective OODA loops. The side that works through its OODA loop faster and tighter than its adversary actually will win the conflict. So in the US, which is what I can speak to, we're highly focused on tightening up that OODA loop in a variety of ways. That's ingesting data, that's looking at the actual targeting picture, looking at logistic situation, looking at predictive maintenance. We have a ways to go. I don't know whether we're first, second, third, fourth, fifth, but we've made some progress, and the work continues by folks like Justin over here.
All right, Justin Fanelli, we have China, we have the United States. What's your take?
Thanks for having me, and good afternoon. With the government in shutdown right now, I'm here as a private citizen, and I actually am a professor at Georgetown, and I teach a class called Software-Defined Warfare. And so the first 3 weeks of that course is actually benchmarking. And so there are a number of different fields that we're looking at. Where are allies? When we talk about AI, at times we do a big disservice because we're not separating out machine learning and generative AI and all of the different pieces, as well as the use cases that Chris mentioned. Bless you. And so as we think about who is leading in a particular area, I think it's important to kind of break that down into where is the talent, where is the scaling, as Kathleen mentioned, where are the use cases that are like just hugely advantageous. And the first place that I go to is, from benchmarking perspective, decision advantage. And so the OODA loop is one of the best ways to measure decision advantage. If you're thinking about that properly and you have the lead that the US has traditionally had in other technological areas, to include nuclear and others, you can force more of a stand down. And so one of the measures for OODA loop at the outcomes level is deterrence. Our OODA loop still compares very favorably to anyone I've seen, and then we are working with our mission partners across allied nations to improve the sharing, improve how they make decisions, and connect dots. So I'd say from an interdependency perspective, teams still work better than individuals, and I like our team's hand.
So let's talk about the United States a little bit, because in order to innovate, which is the title of this panel, we both need resilient and reliable and functioning infrastructure. Just in the last week or so, we saw an Amazon cloud outage that took out a vast swath of the internet for most of the day. Today, we have an Azure cloud outage. We are seeing critical infrastructure being hit by cyber attacks on an almost daily basis, from water supply systems to energy systems. And we're also seeing an increase in reported incidents of GPS jamming around the world. So my question is the pace of innovation outrunning the state of our infrastructure, Dr. Fisher?
I don't know if the pace of innovation is outrunning it. It depends on what you're using the innovation to do. I think that it's more a question of what is our incentive structure and what is that incentive structure actually rewarding. I think we've rewarded moving really fast and creating new capabilities really fast. We haven't been rewarding resilience very much. We rewarded a little bit during COVID, but generally we've been rewarding creating new capabilities. And I think that as we go forward and as AI really enables cyber attacks, we see that AI is enabling faster, improving the cyber kill chain kind of at all parts of the cyber kill chain. That is going to make cyber attacks more common and these kind of outages more common, because that's going to enable like adversaries, like nation-state adversaries. It's going to enable ransomware groups. It's going to enable terrorist groups. It's going to enable the future of script kiddies. We're going to have rogue AI agents that just get out of their protective zones and cause chaos. All of those things are going to make resilience much more important, and that means we're going to need to have our incentive structures reward resilience more than they have in the past. The good news is that we actually know a lot about making our systems more resilient. We just haven't been using those capabilities because the incentive structures haven't rewarded resilience. And the other piece of good news is that the same AI that is sort of raising the threat threshold can also make the techniques to make systems more resilient easier to use and faster to use. So there's kind of an arms race here of things getting worse and things getting better as we supercharge things with artificial intelligence. And which way are we going to go is going to depend on those incentive structures, and can we get our act together fast enough to make the good side win rather than the bad side win. Do you want to say something
I would
here?
add to that, yes. So we all love innovation. Innovation is going to keep going faster. The super skill at this point, the unlock, is innovation adoption. The Atlantic Council wrote a report in 2023. It said the US is awesome at innovation. How are they at innovation adoption? Does it take a long time? Who knows what the Valley of Death is? Who's heard of the Valley of Death? So most of you haven't. This is, for all of the things that we fund, there is this big lag where either it gets product market fit or it doesn't, but it's a very lossy process. And so we sometimes lack the tools to adopt, which means that sometimes there is not commercial parity on capabilities. Sometimes one capability, like autonomy, is way far ahead in air, in UAS, but behind on USV. And so what can this look like? This looks like, to Kathleen's point, from a measures perspective, are we measuring the outcomes that we need? Innovating is great. Are we measuring innovation? Maybe, but patents are a bad proxy. The question is, what outcomes are we doing? Adaptability came out as the #1 thing in Ukraine, right? If you're going to be good at the cat and mouse, if you're going to play defense, you need to be able to change everything in 7 days. From a resilience perspective, we can get a 70-second cyber capability, but if that doesn't make you more resilient, you just increased your costs. So what are the actual things that we can turn on that allow us to take an innovation and put it into action, apply the AI faster? That's what we're rewarding.
Are there any kind of startups or technologies right now that would solve some of the resiliency and the infrastructure problems that we have today? Chris?
So I think one thing folks have to realize when it comes to security and when it comes to security problems is that these attacks or the gaps in technology don't sort of just come on high and materialize. There's a person or an organization on the opposite side of that, of the computer, of the network, who's engaging in some sort of adversarial attack. It's a threat actor of some kind or a transnational gang. And what's important there is realizing that combing the ecosystem maybe for other open source intelligence or other sort of threat intelligence that is able to harden system A or system B against a potential attack. The other thing I'll say is that the basics reign supreme from folks I've discussed with. Most attacks stem from some sort of identity issue or social engineering or code bug or misconfiguration. And I think overall good hygiene, basic practices go a long way, even if the attack surface is evolving and increasing.
I think
Please go ahead.
37% of attacks involve code bugs, and of those 37% that involve code bugs, 80% are related to memory safety or parsing errors. And we know how to fix those, right? Don't write in either don't write in a memory unsafe language, so use Rust instead of C, or prove your C code is memory safe, right? We have technology to solve that. We're just not using it yet, or we're not adopting it, right? We have a massive installed code base in memory unsafe languages. That's a place where AI might be able to make a huge help, right? If we can automatically translate from C or C++ into idiomatic Rust and prove the thing is memory safe. DARPA has a program right now called Tractor that is aiming to do that, right? Parsers, right? Parsers is super old technology. Parsers are the technology that takes an input stream and converts it into the representation that a computer can actually do something with. Super old technology. Instead of writing that by hand, write down the grammar that describes the expected input format and generate the parser. We can even prove that functionally correct and check that in a theorem prover, right? The reason why writing them by hand is really problematic is that there's so many error cases, and people just don't think of all the error cases. But when you generate from a grammar, it turns out computers are really, really good at generating all the error cases. We just fix those two things. DARPA has a program called SafeDocs that really worked on expanding the expressivity of the grammars, and there's programs that they're running right now on automatically identifying the shotgun embedded parsing code and extracting it, figuring out the grammar, and converting it, right? That's another place where AI can help a lot. If we can just do those two things, it would dramatically reduce our threat exposure.
So there are plenty of startups and founders at Disrupt who are looking to work and provide technology in the AI national security space. Historically, startups have struggled to get military and government contracts because of red tape and bureaucracy. But Justin, you've been the CTO of the Navy since I think 2023, and so you have spent much of your time cutting that red tape and bureaucracy. What challenges are you still hearing from startups that want to sell or provide their technology to the government?
Totally. So for what it's worth, I was acting until this year, and I think I'm told there are two ways the U.S. changes: crisis and leadership. And at this moment, the amount of support for public-private to go all in is much more significant. And so I think we're mostly talking about commercial technology here. Hey, this wasn't invented here has really flown up until the last 6 or 12 months. And so I think we're in the active process of becoming a better buyer. So much so that I'll give you an example. We have a VC like Chris who came in to work with us, and then we have a guy who started a private equity fund, and he said, hey, I want to take a pay cut, let me go serve. And so those two guys are walking around, they understand the economics, and they're talking to all of our program managers and program executive officers and saying, hey, let me see your flow, let me see your funnel. What do you mean? I just have a vertical stovepipe program. I've been working on this most of my adult career. That's not satisfactory. And so what we're doing is we're converting into portfolio mindsets and actually have that funnel, that deal flow. And so those two gents and I, we came up with an innovation adoption kit to allow this to get better. And so we're measuring the friction between startups. And I'll tell you a quick stat. So for the last 15 years, the Department of Navy had fewer partners, vendors, than we did the year before. So every year we went down. Every year we potentially, in some way, it either consolidated or we became a worse customer. This year, for the first time, we went up. And so the amount of VC backed that we're working with right now and private capital backed and the way to pull that through, it's the best way to keep up. And so I think we recognize that and are cutting a lot more red tape than in the past.
So why this year are things getting better?
I think there's some urgency. So one of the things we talk about is the Davidson window. And so in 2027, a now retired Admiral Davidson, who was the Indo-PACOM commander, said this is the time period when the window opens that China can attack Taiwan. That type of urgency stirred action. There are still countdown clocks around the Pentagon. A second is I think we have more executors and business folks in the Department of War than we did before. And so they are just picking up on some of this. The economic story has carried more this year than in the past. And what that's translated as is more kind of startups in our ecosystem. There's one more thing. When we wrote our first AI strategy as a department 7 years ago, it was, hey, build infrastructure, figure some things out. What is happening right now is, that was the famous story where a couple companies who were working with us left. A lot of people want to serve in this way. A lot of people recognize the world is more volatile than it used to be, and they want to be a part of something larger. And so I have students, I have just mission-driven folks. It's actually easier to recruit a millionaire than an undergrad to come work in the government right now because people want to give back. So I'd say that push is one of the big reasons.
Chris, is that something you're seeing as well? What are you hearing from the founders that you chat with?
We're seeing a lot of dynamics going on. So if you think about how the government previously bought systems or has historically bought systems, they'd identify a problem and say, hey, we think we need something to fix it. I don't know what kind of technology we need. It would take them 5 years to figure out roughly what they want to buy. We call it the requirements process. And then it might take another 5 years to see what else is out there to work through a handful of systems. You start with maybe 10, and then you will it down to 3, and then you will it down to 1 or 2, and that takes another 5 years, and then you got to buy a lot of it, so it takes a while to actually start producing that and manufacturing and get it out to the fleet. And I think this is charitable based on some stats. 15 years, let's call it 15 years.
17 to 27. 17
to 27, all right. Let's go with 17, so that's 2008, if you're thinking about civilian technology. So I'm not sure if Twitter was founded yet, or X. The iPhone would have just come out a year prior. And you would have started just using Facebook, you might just use MySpace. So imagine if just now you were able to buy the iPhone 2 or the iPhone 3 and a computer with Windows ME or Windows XP, because that's what was available in 2008. That is the status quo of how our national security apparatus has been buying technology. And certainly over the last few years, and as we've seen the acceleration over the past few months, we've seen a concerted effort to shatter that paradigm and acquire technology quickly. Now, it is early days. There's still a lot of work to do. There's lots of promising policy changes and different ways to fix that overall process, but it remains to be seen exactly how effective that is over the next few years.
So just 10 seconds on that. There's a lot of nerds in the audience. I can see you. You reflect. That was the waterfall process. The requirements, the budget, all of these processes are waterfall. And so we've started demonstrating what Agile looks like, and we can do things in 18 months that we used to be able to do in 18 years. No one loses in that situation.
One of the things I want to ask about is this is the notion of authority to operate. It's essentially the kind of like the cybersecurity seal of approval that the code is kind of safe and it's going to run to a high degree of assurance. But what would help reduce some of the red tape and bureaucracy that goes along with that process, Dr. Fisher?
Yeah, so DARPA, currently my affiliation is with RAND, but up to a month ago, I was the director of the Information Innovation Office at DARPA, which is one of DARPA's 6 technical offices. So DARPA had a program called ARCOS, which was focused on exactly this problem, right? The ATO process is fundamentally broken because the ATO is designed to work in a waterfall system where you have years to look at a system and decide whether it is fit for purpose. It's well-intentioned with the goal of making sure that a system is well constructed and it's well configured for cybersecurity. The problem is it takes a year to get the paperwork in order to get the certificate. And the consequence of a process that takes that long is that once you get the certificate, you are not going to reopen the box to get the certificate again when you discover a problem in the system. So you can imagine a system has a lot of software in it, you just got the certificate, and now somebody comes and tells you there is an exploitable vulnerability in your system. Like, that would require you to go through that whole process again. Like, are you going to do that, or are you going to be like, we're going to wait until we have the next revision, which is like on a year kind of time frame, or like longer than that. So the upshot of this very well-intentioned, well-thought-out for waterfall process is that systems end up locking in vulnerabilities, which is terrible, right? But we have technology, formal methods-based technology, code analysis kind of technology that can go and look at, not with humans looking at the system, not by looking at processes that are proxies for what we really care about, but we can automatically, at speed and scale, analyze the code to determine, is this code actually fit for purpose? Does it really have the intrinsic cybersecurity properties we care about? And we can run those at speed and scale, at the same pace of developing the code in the first place. So we could envision an ATO process that runs at the same kind of agile sprints that the code development process runs in the first place, so that we don't have this huge behemoth of a slowdown process at the end. And I think there's lots of energy going on inside the Department of War now to blow up this process and adopt a more agile artifact-based process, but it will take time to work out those kinks. So do you have anything you want to say on that?
This is what's different about this moment. If you live in a world for long enough, it's easy to focus on the process, and that's what a lot of the community has done. If outcomes are not served by that process, it has to change, but it's all they know. And so what I title this moment as is an outcomes era. And so if you're thinking about this by like related to either tech insertion or adoption or working with the government, it's called TechCrunch Disrupt, show where you can disrupt something that we're doing right now and allow for divestment so that we can replace it with something better. And so what we hadn't done before is apples to apples. Hey, we are using the ATO process, which checks people in the door and then doesn't know what happens once they're in the club. Or we're doing continuous improvement, and here is where you pay for, as a service, continuous monitoring, continuous improvement, and then you go along the way. That's an easy trade. We just need the executors to see the side-by-side trades, and so this is why it's easier to procure AI than it used to be. Because if you're looking at what part of the solution is special, you can get bogged down. There are a handful. When I was at DARPA, I knew, hey, here are the 10 best people in the country, in my opinion, at evaluating AI. But almost anyone smart can evaluate outcomes. And so if you can have that conversation with the government to say, we don't need these 5 solutions anymore, we can replace them with this one solution, and the outcomes improve, then we can make an ROI decision. I've never heard the government talk about return on investment. We can do that now.
So how does the Navy balance the need for AI innovation with the risks of introducing security flaws through rapid deployment? In other words, I'm asking you, how do you move fast without breaking things?
So there are a couple like misnomers about speed, in my opinion. One is sometimes people think speed costs more. If you're paying, most of our contracts are cost plus contracts. They're labor contracts. If you move faster, you might spend less, right? If you're doing more activities in parallel, which we absolutely are, I'll tell you a C story. I took over an 8-portfolio office, and I said, hey, how many big problems do you have? And they said, we have about 15 big problems. And I said, how many like moonshots are you doing right now? 2. Are we not expecting any more big problems? No, we get about 3 or 4 big problems a year, so we're never going to catch up. So this is me sprinting behind Usain Bolt, right, with him getting a head start. That's a bad model. And so the answer to your question is, like, comparing to the as is the goal. People, like ethereally, want to compare to perfect, but we're not in a green field. We all live in a brown field world. And so when we can show apples to apples that something coming in and it's being DevSecOps delivered, it's taking something else away, if it's done with the right practices and we evaluate that, we're showing that the faster delivered stuff is more secure and more resilient. And if we can do that more often, then we can have, what do they say in the nuclear community? 2 to get 1, 1 is 0. So you need some of that resilience and redundancy. And then we have multiple paths. There's all kinds of things we can do by going a little bit faster.
Right, like the faster delivered software won't have those baked in vulnerabilities, so it will be more secure. You sure might have more vulnerability, and have like new vulnerabilities, but then they'll get fixed faster, right?
And I'll tell you what you don't do, which is what happens now, which is, let's say you have a system or a problem set or an area X, and you have 5 engineers from, let's say, a Palantir or a Raytheon or somewhere else. They're read into the most classified programs. They spin out to start a company because they see a problem that they know they can address. Those same people can't then turn around and work on the same problem set until they go through what's called the FCL process, actually get the appropriate clearances to get read into the same programs. And then if they're trying to seek an ATO, authority to operate, as you mentioned, well, you may get an ATO to one system if you're tracked correctly, but multiple branches have multiple systems, and then each branch has additional systems after that. And so one ATO doesn't necessarily transfer to a different system. And so what the end state here is that you have smart folks who are read into different problem sets, who have these skills to tackle those problem sets that cannot work in those specific areas because of policies and process that are not leading to outcomes.
So with just a minute or so on the clock, I want to ask you, Chris, with AI innovation at the blistering speed that it's going at, are there any investments that you wouldn't consider? Are there any products or technologies out there that you think are almost too dangerous to invest in?
Yeah, so I think it is a very dramatic moment. It is very, there's a lot of gravity in the situation when it comes to the capabilities you're trying to deliver to the warfighter. The thing we look at, and I got this from my old career, my old job was a weapons systems officer, and so I dealt with all manner of different systems. I think we mostly evaluate the teams, the seriousness of the teams, the ability of the teams to develop whatever technology they're developing responsibly, and anchor more so on that as opposed to a specific capability or a specific area. At the end of the day, the people that are going to deliver, or the way we're going to get the capabilities to the warfighter, is by investing in strong, capable teams to do so, and that is what we look at.
Okay. And then just with just a few seconds left on the clock, I'd like to ask you, Justin, what advice would you give startups wanting to enter the national security space today?
Compare to what we have right now. And so our best bet at long-term deterrence is having a huge lead. If you have no lead or a minor lead, people are more likely to test you. If you have a large lead in a unstable world, this is the best advantage you have. And so how do we up our buying power? We have more folks who are willing to work on this, and we show, hey, you can get rid of one of these and you can get 40 of these instead. So find that anchor that you're comparing against and show how much more resilient, how much more adaptable, how many millions of man hours you'll save on one of our carriers, how much time you can give back to sailors and Marines doing overhead who can then focus on their mission and the reason that they joined the service. So show that comparison, look at the outcomes, and show us how much better that you can disrupt what we're working on.
Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for this panel. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.